After making as many videos as I do on Fallout location lore, there have been a few that I think about from time to time. The one that I actively have been thinking about lately is the mystery of the Sentry Bot at the Robotics Disposal Ground. I know it doesn't sound that interesting on paper, but once I tell you about this location and what's known, it may change how you feel about it. I can't say too much in this intro, but stick around and you'll get to see how deep this little mystery may go. Well, let's get started. Oh, where to begin other than the main location itself. The disposal ground is a relatively small junkyard located in the north of the map in Fallout 4. Honestly, upon walking by, it doesn't seem like much is going on. It's a gated yard, though the gates themselves are falling apart. It's surrounded by your typical dead trees and debris as well. There's a small building on the lot too. It houses miscellaneous tools, a weapons workbench, and a terminal, which we'll get into in a moment. The biggest thing that may allure you to this location is the somewhat dormant Sentry Bot that sits quietly in the back of the junkyard. Hell, you may even be scared that it'll come to life just by getting near it, but alas, it won't. It just sits there, gathering dust. Weird, right? Why would there be a seemingly great-looking Sentry Bot in a junkyard? Well, this is where the terminal comes into play. When you enter the small building on site, you'll notice the terminal in the back left corner of the room. This usually would not cause any alarm, but as we get closer to it, we can see a skeleton slumped on the ground next to it. Blood is splattered on the wall behind the terminal, with some of it speckled on the shell of the terminal itself too. On the keyboard lies a bloody handprint, the final grab of someone who just lost their life. We're no strangers to seeing death in Fallout, but this already raises questions before we even log into the terminal. Who does this skeleton belong to, and most importantly, why were they seemingly murdered? When we log into the terminal, we see three options: the delivery log, employee notes, and play tape. We're going to go through these and see what we can uncover. Under the delivery logs, we see a list of robots that were disposed of on certain dates, starting at the earliest on November 16, 2076, and the final documented drop-off almost a year later on October 15, 2077. It may be important to note that the Great War started on October 23, 2077, only 8 days after the final drop-off at this disposal site. As you can see here, the final drop-off was one prototype Sentry Bot with unknown issues. The time frame itself is curious and may even be just a coincidence, but it's not as damning as what we'll find in the employee notes. Under the employee notes, we find 6 exchanges between 2 employees who worked at this site before the Great War, Dylan and Mike. You can also see the dates listed next to these conversations and how they line up with the delivery log timeframes we mentioned earlier. It may sound like a lot, but we're going to read through these to make sure you see how suspicious this whole scenario is. I'll also make voices for both Dylan and Mike for full immersion. You're welcome.
Weird. More of those Protectrons with no arms or legs. How do you even miss that in production? Do they have robots building those robots or something? That's a scary thought.
Robots making robots is yikes. We just got these iBots in the other day and they were actually missing their eyes. Isn't that ironic? Ha. Anyway, yeah, missing something like that, they must have had a lot of their own bots on staff or something. They just dropped some Sentry Bots off. It doesn't look like there's anything wrong with them. Why would they just throw them away like this? I'm thinking of taking one of these things home and setting it up to mow my lawn for me. What do you think?
More of those Protectrons missing everything. I heard from a couple of the other nearby sites that they keep getting them too. Someone made a big mistake. Weird that it's cheaper to dump them here than it is to send them back and attach some arms to them. Some weird guys dressed in all black dropped off a Sentry Bot of some kind. They wouldn't say who they were. The thing looks like it's fully functional. They even had it drive itself into the yard and shut down. I looked in the trunk they threw next to it, and it has a holotape in there. I'm thinking about seeing what's on it, but those guys in black have me pretty freaked out.
I was joking about taking one of those bots home. Don't look at that holotape. If those guys dumped it all here, they had a good reason, and you probably don't want to get mixed up in it. We've got an easy job here. Come in a couple times a week, walk the perimeter, and go home. Don't let your curiosity screw that up.
We learn a couple of things from these logs. First, a group of men dressed in all black dropped off a Sentry Bot with no intention of saying why and left without a trace. Secondly, I would argue the most important, is the crate next to the Sentry is supposed to have a holotape in it that controls the robot. But upon closer inspection, we see that it's not located in the crate. It's instead located in the terminal, which means, based on the employee logs, specifically the one dated October 15th, 2077, Dylan's curiosity got the best of him, and he placed the holotape in the terminal to learn more about the Sentry Bot. This leads me to believe that the skeleton lying next to the terminal is Dylan's. Considering the next message sent by Mike was 5 days later, it's safe to assume that Dylan was killed shortly after him tampering with the holotape, which also means he did not see Mike's warning about messing with it before it was too late. Based on the blood, it appears Dylan was killed by a single gunshot to the head, presumably by one or more of the men in black to stop him from pursuing any further. The real question after discovering all this is why? Why would someone go through the trouble of doing all of this? What was their motive or end goal here? Well, I wanted to research and find anything else in the game that could help me find answers to these questions, if any even exist. I also want to explore the Fallout Wiki to see if we could shed any light on these things as well. Now, we need to understand more about the Sentry Bot, lore-wise, before continuing. So hear me out for this, as we're going to dig a bit deeper into not only the Sentry Bots as a whole, but also this particular Sentry Bot. The Sentry Bot is the heaviest class of combat robot used by the United States Armed Forces. The Sentry Bot was designed with a single purpose, providing security through overwhelming firepower. It had become standard military equipment by at least 2063, though earlier prototypes existed before then. Its role was to engage enemies at range using a wide variety of weapons, including miniguns, Gatling lasers, rocket launchers, and back-mounted clustered grenade launchers. At the same time, its thick armor and multiple redundant systems allowed it to withstand prolonged combat. Because of its durability and firepower, it is widely considered one of the most dangerous robots ever created and Robco Industries' most effective combat machine. Now that we have a basic understanding of its origin, what about the specific Sentry Bot at this location? Per the Fallout Wiki, an inactive combat Sentry Bot prototype Mark IV can be found at the Robotics Disposal Ground. Inside the shed near the entrance to the facility is a terminal with a holotape loaded in. Activating the holotape on the terminal powers up the Sentry Bot outside, causing it to begin patrolling the area. If the holotape is ejected from the terminal and used by the player character's Pip-Boy, the sole survivor can command the Sentry Bot to travel to various locations in the Commonwealth to clear enemies before returning to the junkyard. These destinations are limited to nearby military sites. Once activated, the sole survivor can also interact with the robot using the Robotics Expert perk to issue additional commands. Now that we have a more rounded understanding of the Sentry Bot, the real question still remains: who were the men in black, and why did they drop off this robot and allegedly murder, rest in peace Dylan, anyone who thought to look too deep into it? To get closer to answering this question, we need to look at what locations it could have come from in the Commonwealth. After some extensive research, I found what I believe to be every likely location it could have come from. Some of these, unfortunately, will not provide much, so we'll get through some of them quickly. Hester's Consumers Robotics is exactly what it sounds like. It's a department store of sorts that's here to sell robots to its customers. Once you enter, there are a lot of, for lack of a better term, sleeping Mr. Handy robots. If you wake them, they'll typically attack you on sight. Nothing too crazy compared to what else we've seen in the Commonwealth. However, once you make your way to the back of the store, you'll notice something peculiar. There is an Assaultron guarding the room, and like the others, they'll attack you on sight. But next to him is a dormant security bot. Interesting, right? If you try to interact with him at all, he'll explode. It's not listed as a prototype like the one at the disposal ground, but a normal Sentry Bot. But similarly, he is obviously defective. Outside of him, there is no other link from this location, assuming we consider this a link at all. Watts Consumer Electronics, similarly to Hester's, was a consumer department store. After walking in for the first time, it also has several dormant Protectrons and Mr. Handys. You won't see any of this in the footage because I accidentally turned them on and had to destroy them. None will attack you unless you provoke them though, or unless you activate a terminal downstairs. Unfortunately, this location does not aid in our search as there was no information about Sentry Bots or the disposal ground. The General Atomics factory is where I found that things started to get a little bit more interesting. We know from earlier that Robco is the creator of the Sentry Bot, that much is true. But what I didn't know until I stumbled across it was that Robco and General Atomics International had frequent collaborations during their time pre-war. In order to maintain their market share, General Atomics collaborated with Robco to create the Mr. Handy robot line. After that success, they went on to create Liberty Prime and RoboBrains as well, for the US Army of course. As interesting as this information is, after a sweep of the factory and reading its terminals, there is no mention of Sentry Bots here or even an inkling of them being built in this particular factory. The Robco Sales and Service Center on paper also seems like the best location to check out. I mean, Robco themselves make the Sentry Bot. Surely there's something there that will help us out. No. Unfortunately, this Robco branch only deals with terminals, the selling and maintaining of them to be exact. Outside of this, the only other notable thing about this area is that it's the location of the Mechanist's Lair, or the Robotics Technology Facility RB-2851. But that area specializes in forcibly making RoboBrains from reprimanded employees in the Robco Center. That alone is a lot to take in, but we'll save it for another video. Ultimately, this location did not help with finding any more information. The main problem we are having is that none of these locations get us any closer to where the Sentry Bot came from or who the Men in Black were, which means we have to divulge into our own theories as to where it came from, and I do have a couple to ponder. I'll admit, during my research, this theory showed up in a Reddit thread somewhere, so I can't take full credit. Seemingly, Robco Industries is ran autonomously from its Capital Wasteland facility, meaning it's run almost entirely by robots. So, is it possible that this specific Sentry Bot was created and sent by the robots, assuming they have some sentience, to the disposal ground? Maybe they created a shipping order and sent it there for their own nefarious plans. There is nothing I have seen that could back this theory outside of sheer speculation. I also am unsure why one of the Men in Black would kill Dylan for looking deeper into the matter regarding this theory. So there are obvious plot holes here that we can't easily fill, but it is very Fallout coded if true. I'm not sure this is much of a theory, but I started putting two and two together during my research, and this feels like the closest to correct I can get. But with no official confirmation, it still technically makes this a theory. As we all know, Robco Industries is owned and operated by Robert House. The same company engineers and creates the Sentry Bot robots. This we already know, as we mentioned it previously, but Robco also has ties to the US government. Robco has several established defense contracts for different robots and weapon manufacturing, like the building of Liberty Prime, turret defense systems, and, you guessed it, the build and use of robots for both military and civilians. I know what you're thinking. It's not entirely out of the question for the US government to have made this robot and placed it into the disposal ground and silenced anybody who had questions about it, like Dylan. But I think it goes a bit deeper than that. Surprise, surprise, it's clear that Robert House has ties to the Enclave, though from what I can tell, he is not a member of their organization. Since he deals with the US government, he, by extension, is working with the Enclave. So where does this land the theory? I think that the US government, which again, by extension, the Enclave, were working on new prototypes for the Sentry Bots that they could train to protect military installations. Specifically, I feel that the Enclave were working on this in secret in hopes to use these sentries for themselves once they perfected the technology. Once this Sentry Bot is activated, it can only travel between 4 different military checkpoints to help protect them. Those locations are USAF Satellite Station Olivia, South Boston Checkpoint, Revere Satellite Array, and Fort Hagen. Before you ask, yes, I went to all 4 locations and found nothing about the existence of the Sentry Bot. At some point during the process of training and creating the Sentry Bot, it started to experience some malfunctions. Problems that, assuming the Enclave were aware of the end of the world, they could not fix before the Great War, which would explain why it was dropped off at the disposal ground about a week before the war happened. As for Dylan, he seems to have been eliminated as a loose end to protect what the Enclave were trying to hide, which in this case was their own robotic experimentation. So there you have it. I think it was the Enclave in the shadows the whole time, which isn't terribly exciting for Fallout. But what do you think? I am extremely curious if you all have any opinions on this or what you think it could be. I spent a long time researching this and would really appreciate a like, as it helps the video get out to more folks. Otherwise, thank you for making it this far if you have, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.